Hey everyone, so coming at you with a recap of last night's study in Ecclesiastes. It was good to get back into the Word together this past week, and so the text that we covered was Ecclesiastes chapter 5, so we're about a little less than halfway through the book itself. And so last night, the title of the message or our time together was "What owns you is your master." That seems kind of overly obvious, but the reality is whatever or whoever owns you, whatever captivates your time, whatever captivates your attention, whatever gets your devotion, that's the thing that owns you. And the preacher in Ecclesiastes talks about a couple of ways that we tend to be mastered by things in this world that we were not meant to be mastered by. Now, the first one is your tongue. And so I asked the question, is your tongue your master? And within the text, he mentions some things. He says that it's better to draw near to God to listen than to offer sacrifice of fools. He says, be not rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be hasty to utter a word before God. He says, let not your mouth lead you into sin. He says, don't make a vow to God. And if you make a vow to God, be quick to fulfill it. And so we talked about this idea of we don't get to go to God and demand how things are going to go. Like, we don't get to go to God and tell him how we're going to live our lives. We don't get to go with this kind of proud arrogance that says God is lucky to have me. And it's when we do that that our tongue becomes our master, and our tongue ends up being the thing that owns us. And we end up just spewing out all kinds of arrogant, silly things that are irreverent and show that Christ isn't our master, but our tongue is, and our own hearts and our own thoughts. So we don't get to go to God and say, you're lucky to have me, and we don't get to go to God and say, this is how it's going to go. We don't get to go to him with this arrogance. However, that doesn't mean we can't go to God honestly, right? That doesn't mean we can't go to God with how we're really feeling. That doesn't mean we can't go to God with what we're struggling with. But because of what Christ has done for us, Hebrews tells us that we can go to him with confidence, knowing that he'll hear us and care for us and give us grace and mercy to help in time of need. James 1 warns us to be slow to speak, quick to listen, and slow to become angry, because our anger and our arrogance doesn't bring about the righteousness of God. And James as well, he says that God gives grace to the humble and opposes the proud. And in the book of Matthew, Jesus warns that we're going to have to give an account for every careless word we say. And so we need to be understanding that words in and of themselves are not evil. Speaking honestly before God is not evil. But it's when we do it with haste and arrogance and pride is when our tongues master us that it becomes a problem. And the writer says, for when dreams increase and words grow many, there is vanity. But God is the one who you must fear. We need to fear him and bow our lives to him and submit our lives to him and say, God, how do you want me to live my life? God, I'm grateful that you love me enough to save me. Not he's lucky to have me, and not, God, this is how it's going to go, but God, how do you want it to go? God, I'm grateful you love me and chose me. So we did a couple of applications. The first application was this, out of that. The teens were instructed, you can do this as families as well, each day set aside a specific time where all you're doing is praising and thanking God. Nothing else. You're not asking him for anything. You're not requesting from him. You can do that, and you should do that. But just as an exercise in humility and getting our eyes and our minds fixed on who God is and instilling on our own hearts and minds the fear of God, we should spend time praising him and thanking him for who he is. And I sent a chart home with your teens to that was it's an attributes of God, so that you can just kind of praise God for who He is and what He's done. So that was the tongue. Is your tongue your master? Does your tongue own you and control you? And then the second thing was wealth. Is wealth our master? And he goes on in verse 10. The preacher says this: "He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income. This also is vanity." It's very easy. We live in a wealthy country, and it's very easy for us to seek that. It's very easy for us to run after wealth and success. It's very easy for us to believe that if we follow God, then that's actually what He'll give us. Right? There's that prosperity gospel, that evil, I would call it, because that's what it is. Evil prosperity gospel says, come to Jesus and He'll give you health, wealth, and success. That's not at all what the gospel promises us. It's not a promise that God has given to us. We may get that in this life, and if we get that, that's a good gift from Him, but that's certainly not the purpose of the follower of Christ. That's certainly not why we follow Jesus. And so the second question is wealth your master? Do you think, man, if I just had a little bit more, if I had more money, if I had more stuff, that would satisfy me, then I'd be happy. And we talked about, and as the preacher tells us, that it won't satisfy you. It won't slake your lust. It won't stop the craving that you have for more. And then we talked about some things that the preacher mentions that are a result of wealth being our master, being our God. It results in sleeplessness. It results in people being leeches and wanting to take your riches. It results in foolish transactions. It results in all sorts of things. And so there's all sorts of problems that come when we make wealth our master, when wealth rules our lives. And so again, we want to point out that if God gives you stuff, if He gives you money, it's not evil. Those things in and of themselves are not bad, but it's when they rule us, it's when we are owned by them, that it becomes a problem, right? And so any good gift, any source of wealth that God gives us in this life is not meant just for us. We should enjoy it. The preacher tells us that we should enjoy the good gifts of God, but they're ultimately for His glory, right? They're to be used for His glory. So whatever you have isn't really yours. It's a good gift from God. And in Matthew, again, Jesus points out, you cannot serve God and money. You will either hate the one or the other. You can't do both. Your master must be Christ. And I ended with this point. We've been bought with price. We've been paid for, purchased by the blood of Christ through His life, death, and resurrection. And it's costly. And to follow Him means that He's the master and ruler of our lives. You see, what we fail to believe in our minds, especially when it comes to wealth, is that Christ is the treasure hidden in a field, that the man sold everything to purchase that field, to have that treasure. He's the pearl the fisherman found and sold everything to purchase the pearl. He's the coin that the woman searched all day for to find. He's the greatest treasure that we could ever have. And He's worth submitting our lives to. And so that our desires and our words would reflect Him. And we would submit those things to Him, because He's worth it. The gospel is so beautiful and glorious and rich. It's a well that can never be exhausted. It's a treasure that can never be spent and end. That's what's so great about following Jesus. That's why we must fear God and submit our lives to Him, because He's worth it. And He's better than what we want to foolishly say. He's better than all the riches and wealth that this world has to offer. And so the second challenge then was this. I asked the teens, talk to your parents, or maybe on their own, what's something that you have? Maybe it's money, or maybe it's a possession or material thing, some sort of wealth that you have that this week you can use for the glory of God. Together, figure out a way that you can do that. Whether that's help a neighbor, you can give somebody something you can go buy food for someone, a neighbor, something you can, whatever it is, use the resources, the wealth. And listen, in this country, even poor people are generally wealthier and have access to wealth more so than other countries. So, don't make the excuse of, well, we're just poor. God's given you resources to use for His glory, to enjoy those resources and that wealth, but to use it for His glory. So that was the second thing. First application was spend time intentionally just praising God and thanking Him and getting a vision and getting in your sights how great and beautiful and glorious He is, so that your tongue can be submitted to Him. And secondly, think of something that you own, that God has given you, and how you can turn that back to Him for praise and use it for His glory. I hope that this will promote good discussion for you. If you've missed any of our previous videos, you can check it out on the list in this compilation of videos. So I hope you find this helpful. Hope that you're encouraged as a family to pursue Christ